So in this mini-series, we are going to talk about things that we should consider when choosing our next racket. If you've been following this channel, you'll know that I have gone through the recent process of selecting my new racket, and I will reveal that in due time. But there are about 5 things that you need to consider, maybe even more, when it comes to your choice of racket. At the end of the day, it's a personal choice, but I'm just going to go explain and go through a few factors that need to be considered before we make that big choice. Without further ado, let's get into this topic. The next factor to speak about when it comes to choosing your type of racket is your factory set tension. So this is something that you do not actually have control over, because you'll get a squash racket which will have its factory set tension. Most of them are strung at around 28 pounds. I'm not too sure how much that is in kgs, but you can convert that if you do work in a kg system. But your factory set tension can affect how it is that you feel when you're hitting a squash ball. So luckily, even though it's not something you can control in terms of factory set tension, it is something that you can do if you, one, either snap your strings or go get them restrung, or you wait for your strings to snap and you go restring. So you've got two extremes when it comes to tensions for rackets. You've got the higher tension, and you've got obviously a lower tension. Higher tension, you're looking at around 27 to 30 pounds for your string tension. And on your lower side, when you speak about low tension, we're looking at anywhere between 20 to 23 pounds. It's not to say that there are players who do not go lower than these or higher than these, but it is very rare, and these are your common tensions that you'll be using to string your rackets, or the person stringing your rackets will actually give you options for. And then obviously you've got tensions in between. In terms of your high tension, as mentioned, 27 to 30 pounds, this is more of a control tension. You'll find that players which string their strings at a higher tension are looking for a lot more control out of the racket. I, for one, on this racket, which is a teardrop shape, which gives me a lot of forgiveness and a lot of power, I string my rackets at 28 pounds, and what this offers me is a lot of control for my volley drops and as well as my straight drops that I like to use. It's something that I experimented with. I believe this racket came at a tension of around 26 pounds, and I experimented with stringing it at 28 pounds and found it actually worked very well for me at this weight and for this model of racket itself. When it comes to lower tensions, as I mentioned, which is around 20 pounds to 20 to 23 pounds, this is more for power. So looser string would mean that when you're hitting the ball, you get a lot more power out of it. In fact, you do get some squash players which have gone to the extremes of 18 pounds. Someone like Greg Gaultier, who used the traditional shape rackets, would actually string his strings at 18 pounds. He used a control type racket and obviously strung it with power type tension, so that he could have the power that he needed, but also benefited from having the control that he wanted in the shape. So there is an option if you have a control type racket and are looking for more power, and you maybe do not want to change towards a teardrop. There is a solution for you where you can actually string it at a lower tension to generate more power. Same can be said with a teardrop shape racket. If you do not want to go all the way down to traditional shape, you can obviously increase your tension on your strings or get them strung at a higher tension, which will help you with the control aspect of the game. So just a few things to mention when it comes to string tension. Obviously, restringing your rackets can be a costly exercise depending on what type of string that you are using and the labor costs that are incurred with stringing a racket, right? The power and control, even at a certain tension, can also be affected by the type of string that you use. So some people have super thin strings, some people have very thick strings, and even though they string it at a higher tension or lower tension, they might have a different effect or outcome compared to what I've suggested right now in the video. Another thing to mention is that lower tensions are more forgiving on racket frames. So at a higher tension, there is a greater likelihood of you being able to snap the frame of your racket if you make contact with the wall. In fact, that's what happened with this racket here. 3 days after I strung it at 28 pounds, I hit the back wall, and this resulted obviously in the fact that I snapped it. So lower tensions can be more forgiving on your racket frames. Lower tensions also have what I would consider an annoying effect where the strings move a lot, but except for that, that's something else to consider when it comes to your string tension. And just to mention something that I read the other day on the Reddit thread by a Redditor called Scorezone, he basically says that he encourages his squash players to actually string their rackets at a lower tension. This basically teaches the players not to force their shots with bad technique and overhitting the ball, and that can be done by, as he mentioned, lowering the tension of the string. He basically wants the looser tension to do the work for the player, let the racket do the work, instead of the player trying to generate a lot of power and losing their shape and their technique. as he mentioned in his comment, a slower and measured swing will be obviously a lot more accurate at the end of the day. So that is something to consider, and something I have not considered as well when it comes to my traditional frame rackets. I have never actually experimented or thought about actually bringing the tension down or stringing it at a lower tension to see if I can still generate the same amount of power. But even though it's not only a power thing, it is also about the shape of the racket being more forgiving. Thanks for watching this episode in the mini-series about what you need to consider when choosing your next racket. If you have any comments, suggestions, or corrections that need to be made for the people in the community that are interested in picking out a new racket that would fare them best on the squash court, please put a comment down below and let's have a discussion about it. Take care. Cheers.